Chapter 391. Vrindal. 5. Arthur, miasma. Luna's warning came just in time. I grabbed Rose, pulling her tightly against me as I summoned Erebus's power from the depths of my connection with the Lich. Crimson bones materialized around us, forming a protective cage as I channeled Deep Dark through the structure. The bone armor sealed us in a dome of calcified plates interwoven with shadows that absorbed light and energy alike. Boom! A concussive force rocked our shelter as an ice-infused miasma blast crashed against the barrier. The corrupted energy skittered across the surface of the bone armor like oil on water, unable to penetrate the deep dark reinforcement. 3 priests, Luna reported clinically, her awareness extending beyond our physical shelter. 2 at low integration rank, 1 at mid-integration rank. I looked down at Rose, still held protectively in my arms. Her eyes were wide but focused, already analyzing the situation with the cool precision that characterized her approach to danger. "Will you be fine?" I asked. She nodded, her expression settling into calm resolve. "I can assist." Rose wasn't weak by any standard, her gift was formidable in the right circumstances, but as a white-rank practitioner, she lacked the raw power to face integration-rank opponents directly. Against Umbervale priests, her role would necessarily be supportive rather than confrontational. For me, however, these 3 would pose minimal challenge. My recent training had pushed me to the edge of what was possible without achieving resonance, but that was more than sufficient for adversaries of this caliber. I can't use Erebus's domain, I thought, mentally cataloging tactical options. My current limitations meant the domain would only function with a single person in my vicinity, a weakness I'd need to overcome eventually, but irrelevant to the immediate situation. I charged Evolvus with pure light, the blade glowing with divine energy particularly effective against the corrupted miasma. After bracing for one final spell impact against our shelter, I prepared to counterattack. "Stay close to the center," I instructed Rose. She nodded, reaching into her pocket to withdraw a single blue rose, the physical focus for her gift, Paradox. The flower seemed to shimmer between states, simultaneously vibrant and withered, its petals both opening and closing in impossible contradiction. As another blast struck our shelter, I launched forward, shattering the bone armor from within. Fragments exploded outward, momentarily disorienting our attackers as I activated God Flash. The technique carried me instantly behind the nearest priest, a tall figure in the characteristic dark robes of the Umbervale Covenant, face obscured by a bone-white mask etched with forbidden symbols. Before he could register my presence, Evolvus cut through his defensive barrier and into flesh, pure light searing the wound to prevent regeneration. He collapsed with a strangled cry, but I was already moving toward the second priest, who had begun chanting a complex incantation. Dark energy gathered between his raised hands, coalescing into a sphere of concentrated corruption. The spell launched toward me, but midway through its trajectory, it suddenly reversed direction, striking its caster with full force. The priest's shields buckled under his own attack, creating an opening I immediately exploited. I glanced back to see Rose smiling faintly, her blue rose glowing with paradoxical energy. Her gift allowed her to invert cause and effect in limited circumstances, turning attack into self-harm, defense into vulnerability. The final priest, the mid-integration rank threat, proved more capable than his companions. He summoned a barrier of interlocking hexagons that shimmered with malevolent purpose, then launched a barrage of miasma spikes that forced me to dodge rather than advance. "Arthur," Rose called out, her voice steady despite the danger. "Left flank, 3 seconds." I trusted her insight implicitly, shifting my position accordingly. The blue rose in her hand pulsed with energy as she activated her gift once more. The priest's barrier suddenly inverted, its protective function reversing to become a prison instead. The hexagons collapsed inward, constricting around their creator with crushing force. The momentary distraction was all I needed. God Flash carried me through the faltering defensive grid. Evolvus, still wreathed in pure light, struck with precision at the junction between shoulder and neck, a killing blow delivered with surgical efficiency. As the final priest crumpled, I scanned the surrounding area for additional threats. The botanical gardens had emptied of civilians, most fleeing toward designated emergency shelters, though the sounds of combat echoed from various points throughout the city. That was efficient, Rose commented, approaching with careful steps. Her gift had taken its toll. Using Paradox required precise timing and concentration, each activation draining significant energy. Despite this, she remained composed, her breathing only slightly elevated. "Are you hurt?" I asked, quickly checking her for injuries. She shook her head. "I'm fine." But the city. Her gaze turned toward the center of Vrindal, where plumes of smoke now rose from multiple locations. The initial explosions had given way to a more systematic assault, with flashes of combat visible in several districts. I was about to suggest we regroup at the hotel when Rose suddenly froze, her attention fixed on something beyond my shoulder. I turned to follow her gaze and felt my blood chill. A group of citizens was approaching from the main thoroughfare, but their movements were wrong. They walked with jerky, uncoordinated steps, some dragging limbs at unnatural angles. Their faces were vacant, eyes glazed over with a milky film that obscured any hint of consciousness or recognition. "They're not themselves," Rose whispered, instinctively stepping closer to me. I studied the approaching figures, noting the distinctive bluish veins visible beneath their pallid skin and the total absence of normal human reactions. They showed no fear, no awareness of the danger around them, only a mindless, inexorable advance. "Zombies," I confirmed grimly. "The Umbervale Covenant has deployed a mass conversion spell." This was worse than I had anticipated. While I'd known Vrindal would fall, the use of civilian zombies suggested a level of cruelty beyond even what the historical accounts had detailed. These weren't simply the walking dead. They were citizens forcibly transformed while still alive, their consciousness suppressed as their bodies were conscripted into the Covenant's unholy army. "But that's forbidden magic," Rose said, horror evident in her voice. "Even the darkest necromantic practices draw the line at forced conversion of the living." She was right. Traditional necromancy, for all its morally ambiguous applications, maintained strict boundaries around consent and autonomy. What the Covenant had done violated not just ethical codes but fundamental magical principles, a corruption of the natural cycle that Vokert and other legitimate necromantic organizations universally condemned. "The Umbervale Covenant doesn't recognize those limitations," I explained, already calculating our options. "They view moral constraints as weaknesses to be exploited." The first wave of revenants had noticed us now, their shambling progress redirecting toward our position. Though individually weak, their numbers would quickly become overwhelming as more converted citizens joined their ranks. "We need to reach the hotel," I decided, taking Rose's hand. "The other students will be gathering there, and we'll need to coordinate a response." Rose nodded, her initial shock hardening into determination. "There should be a direct route through the commercial district, assuming it hasn't been overrun." As we prepared to move, I cast one final glance at the fallen priests. Their presence so early in the attack confirmed what I had feared. This wasn't a random raid but a coordinated assault designed to cripple Vrindal completely. The city's final night had begun, and despite all my foreknowledge, I wasn't sure if I could change the outcome that history had already written. "Stay close," I told Rose, Evolvus still glowing with pure light as we moved toward the garden exit. "This is just the beginning." Chapter 392. Vrindal, 6. Vrindal City found itself in chaos. Normally, such an attack would instantly alert the ruling family who would then contact the Windwards for support. However, the Covenant had prepared thoroughly. Miasmanet, a sophisticated spell array designed to render all forms of communication within the city useless, had been activated. The complex magical construct required substantial materials and preparation time, but its effectiveness justified the investment. "Beautiful, isn't it?" an excited voice said, gray eyes gleaming as their owner frolicked around the observation platform. Jack looked at her with undisguised disgust. "You have twisted taste as always, Lyra," he said, his eyes narrowing at the spectacle of destruction below. Lyra tilted her head. her platinum blonde hair shifting in perfect contrast against her black robes. The movement highlighted her most distinctive feature, gray eyes that contrasted against her bright hair. "Ah," she giggled, approaching him with exaggerated playfulness. "Are you lying to your big sis, Jack?" "Who is whose big sister?" Jack replied, his expression darkening further. "Come on, don't be like that," Lyra pouted as she moved closer. "We're in the same boat after all." Jack licked his lips as he studied her. Despite his revulsion, he couldn't deny the truth in her words. Lyra occupied a position within the Umbervale Covenant parallel to his own in the Order of the Fallen Flame, both groomed as potential successors to their respective popes. And compared to the other 3 successors Jack had encountered, she was the only one he could begrudgingly respect. Lyra was genuinely powerful, a prodigy who had even successfully fended off the divine dragon of Mount Hua, a peer of the same age whose strength was legendary. What a shame someone like her would waste her life worshipping shadows, Jack thought as Lyra happily hummed, surveying the city's descent into madness with childlike delight. "Anyway, the cardinal's zombification is impressive," Jack observed, leaning over the balcony's edge. Below, formerly ordinary citizens shambled through the streets, their humanity erased by forbidden magic. "Of course it is," Lyra said, pride evident in her voice. "I was surprised my little brother wanted to participate in this, though. Do you hate Mythos Academy so much?" "I'm not participating," Jack replied firmly. "I can't disclose my identity after all, unlike you." "Just do the same thing I did," Lyra suggested, prompting Jack's expression to twist with dismay. The disaster at the Conference of Young Lords and Ladies remained infamous throughout the northern continent. The annual gathering of prominent heirs had turned into a slaughter when the Covenant attacked, with Lyra, herself from a noble lineage, revealed as a traitor who had facilitated the massacre. Half the attending children of the northern continent's elite families had perished that day, leading to dramatically increased security measures across all continents, including mandatory miasma screening for nobility. "Do you know how much trouble I got in for that?" Jack snapped, recalling the aftermath. His own association with the Order had remained hidden thanks to the heavenly demon soul he possessed, but many of his allies had been discovered and executed. He, Lyra giggled without apparent concern for the consequences of her actions. Suddenly, she turned her head, eyes narrowing as her smile widened with predatory interest. "He's the one who beat you, right?" she asked casually, focusing on something in the distance. "Ty," Jack corrected sharply. "Well, this big sis will go beat him up then," she announced, her voice lilting with anticipation. "I'm leaving, Lyra," Jack said, turning away. "I can't be caught." "Of course, scaredy cat," she replied as a spear materialized in her hand. The weapon pulsed with miasma, its heartbeat-like rhythm matching her own excitement as she spun it playfully. "Go!" Jack disappeared into the shadows without further comment, leaving Lyra alone on the observation platform. Her smile widened to unnatural proportions as she surveyed the Crystalline Haven Hotel in the distance, where a particular group of Mythos Academy students had gathered. "Time to introduce myself," she whispered, gripping her spear tighter as she launched herself into the night sky. Inside the Crystalline Haven's grand lobby, Lucifer Windward had taken charge of the situation with characteristic efficiency. The class of students had naturally gravitated together when the attack began, their combat training overriding panic. "The hotel's defensive barriers are holding for now," Lucifer reported, his emerald eyes scanning the assembled group. "But they won't last indefinitely against concentrated assault." Cecilia stood nearby, her crimson eyes narrowed with calculation, as she monitored the hotel's perimeter through a tactical display. "2 breaches detected in the eastern wing," she announced. "Security forces are responding, but they're overwhelmed." "Where's Arthur?" Rachel asked, her normally serene expression tight with concern as she scanned the group. "And Rose?" "They went to the botanical gardens," Serafina replied, her silver hair immaculately styled despite the chaos. I received a message from Rose earlier confirming their plans. Jean Ashbluff's expression remained carefully neutral, though his posture had shifted to combat readiness. The communications blackout suggests a miasma net. They won't be able to contact us. Ren nodded in agreement, his perpetually analyzing gaze focused on the tactical displays. Classic Covenant strategy. Isolate before overwhelming. Ian looked up from the ancient text he'd been consulting. The zombification process they're using isn't standard necromancy. It's corrupted, forcing conversion while the hosts remain alive. Clara Lopez paced nervously, her hands occasionally glowing with elemental energy that betrayed her agitation. Shouldn't we be doing something? People are dying out there. We are doing something, Lucifer replied calmly. We're consolidating our position and gathering intelligence. Rushing out blindly would only create more casualties. His measured response reflected his training under the Windward family's military doctrine. Assess, plan, then act with overwhelming force. Despite his relative youth, Lucifer carried himself with the authority of someone who had been preparing for leadership his entire life. The hotel's emergency lighting cast everything in a pale blue glow, occasionally flickering as distant explosions tested the building's structural integrity. Through the reinforced windows, they could see the spreading chaos. Fires burning unchecked in several districts, citizens fleeing or falling to the advancing revenants, and sporadic magical combat as defenders engaged the Covenant forces. We should establish contact with the professors, Cecilia suggested. Their experience would be valuable in. Her words cut off as the grand chandelier above them exploded in a shower of crystal fragments. Everyone reacted instantly, defensive abilities activating as they scattered to avoid the falling debris. Where the chandelier had hung moments before, a figure now hovered, a young woman with platinum blonde hair and eyes of absolute darkness. Her black robes bore the distinctive crimson sigils of the Umbervale Covenant's inner circle, and the spear in her hand pulsed with malevolent energy. Well, she said, her voice disconcertingly cheerful. The famous Class A of Mythos Academy. How disappointing to find you hiding in here while your city burns. Lucifer stepped forward, his posture shifting subtly as he assessed the threat. Emerald energy began to coalesce around him, his signature wind element responding to his heightened alertness. Identify yourself, he demanded, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of the Windward bloodline. The woman's smile widened unnaturally. So polite. I'm Lyra, Bishop of the Umbervale Covenant and future Pope. She spun her spear playfully, the weapon leaving trails of darkness in its wake. And you must be Lucifer Windward, the so-called prodigy of the North. Lucifer's eyes narrowed slightly, the only indication that her words had registered. Bishop at your age is impressive, he acknowledged coolly, though your choice of allegiance is regrettable. Without waiting for a response, Lucifer launched directly into the first movement of his Grade 6 art myth of the Northern Peak, Winter's Ascent. The temperature in the lobby plummeted instantly as a swirling vortex of wind and ice materialized around him. The technique was beautiful in its deadly precision, condensed ice particles forming microscopic blades that rotated at impossible speeds, creating a defensive barrier and offensive capability simultaneously. Lyra's eyes widened with genuine interest. A Grade 6 art from someone so young with such power? The rumors weren't exaggerated, at least. She responded with casual ease, her spear pulsing once before she thrust it forward. The space between them distorted as astral energy, the evolution beyond enhanced aura, manifested around her weapon. Unlike the enhanced aura of integration rankers, astral energy possessed a reality-warping quality that made it appear both solid and ethereal simultaneously. Chapter 393, Vrindal, 7. This is like a zombie apocalypse. When did the genre change? I thought as I channeled pure light, its divine energy purifying the miasma infecting 3 citizens. The corruption receded from their eyes and skin, their humanity returning as the forced zombification reversed. They bowed in gratitude before hurrying into a nearby shelter, their movements still unsteady from the ordeal. Another small victory in what was becoming an overwhelming battle. Arthur, your friends are in danger. Luna's presence pulsed with urgency in my mind. I pursed my lips, already aware of what that meant. Bishop Lyra would be at the hotel by now, confronting my classmates with power beyond their comprehension. Unlike the weaker Bishop Vale I'd faced in Redmond, Lyra was one of the Covenant's true elites, a prodigy groomed to become their next pope. Even with more allies this time, the question remained. Could I win against someone who had already achieved a spear heart when I hadn't even mastered sword resonance? Doubt is not something you should entertain, Luna chided, her mental voice cutting through my hesitation. And you need to hurry. Your friends are in real danger. That gave me pause. According to the original narrative, Class A would be overwhelmed but ultimately spared, as Lyra merely toyed with them before my arrival. The fact that Luna sensed genuine danger meant something had changed from the story I knew. This wasn't the novel anymore. This was reality, with real stakes and real consequences. Rose, I said, wrapping an arm around her waist without explanation. Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't resist as I gathered mana for a leap that would cover the distance to the hotel in seconds. The moment my feet left the ground, I heard it. A thunderous roar echoing across the city, followed by abrupt silence. Ian. The recognition was immediate as I spotted the ephemeral silhouette of a dragon materialized briefly before dissipating into nothingness. His ultimate technique, summoning the spectral form of his ancestral dragon bloodline, had failed. A dragon, yet so weak. A sweet voice carried through the night air with unnatural clarity, sending involuntary chills down my spine as we landed outside the shattered entrance of the crystalline haven. My blood ran cold at the sight that greeted us. The lobby had been transformed into a battlefield, or more accurately, a slaughterhouse. My classmates lay scattered across the devastated space, each displaying signs of overwhelming defeat. Ian knelt in a pool of his own blood, spectral dragon energy still fading from around his collapsed form. Jean and Ren had been thrown against a wall with enough force to crack the reinforced structure. Seraphina's ice constructs lay melted around her unconscious body. Rachel's pure light had dimmed to almost nothing as she struggled to maintain consciousness. Cecilia, despite her notorious stubbornness, could barely lift her head, blood streaming from her eyes and ears. Clara lay completely motionless, only the slight rise and fall of her chest indicating she still lived. And at the center of it all stood Lucifer, his perfect form now a study in desperate resistance, blood streaming from his overused god's eyes as he prepared for one final stand. Rose, take care of them, I said, my voice steady despite the fury building within me. Erebus's bone armor materialized with unusual intensity, crimson plates interlocking over my skin as I channeled more deep dark than I typically risked. The calcified structure glowed with ominous purpose, responding to my heightened emotional state. Before I could engage, Lucifer launched his desperate final attack. His sword sang through the air, enhanced aura resonating across its edge, as he executed the ultimate movement of his Grade 6 art. White and black mana swirled around the blade, complemented by the 6 elemental affinities he had mastered, all converging in a perfect strike that represented the pinnacle of his current capabilities. Not too shabby, Lyra commented with casual indifference, meeting his attack with a simple thrust of her spear. The disparity in power became painfully evident. Lucifer's enhanced aura shattered on contact, his body hurling backward from the impact. Yet I noticed something others might have missed. Lyra's spear had been pushed back slightly, despite her not bothering to use her own Grade 6 art against him. How arrogant! The thought blazed through my mind as I activated God Flash. My own blade, wreathed in concentrated pure light, closed the distance in an instant. The attack was perfectly timed to exploit the millisecond opening created by Lucifer's final effort, a continuation of his assault that Lyra couldn't have anticipated from a new combatant. The pure light edge sliced through space, aimed precisely at the junction between Lyra's neck and shoulder, a killing blow by any standard measure. For the first time, surprise flickered across her features. Not fear, but genuine interest as she recognized the technique for what it was. Her reaction defied normal perception. Spear shaft angling to intercept my blade with such speed that the air between us distorted from displaced energy. The collision sent shockwaves throughout what remained of the lobby, the final windows shattering as pure energy dissipated outward. I maintained my footing, enhanced bone armor absorbing enough of the impact to keep me from being thrown backward like my classmates. Well, well. Lyra's eyes gleamed with newfound excitement as she studied me. You must be Arthur Nightingale. Jack mentioned you were interesting, but he failed to mention just how interesting. I didn't respond to the bait, instead taking the momentary pause to assess the battlefield more thoroughly. Rose had already moved to Rachel's side, her paradox gift active as she attempted to reverse the worst of the injuries. Lucifer was struggling back to his feet, stubborn determination written across his bloodied features despite the obvious futility of further resistance. I suppose introductions are in order, Lyra continued, twirling her spear with playful grace that belied its deadly precision. Bishop Lyra of the Umbervale Covenant, future pope and architect of tonight's entertainment. She glanced around at my fallen classmates with casual disinterest. Your friends put up an admirable effort, especially the Windward boy. Such talent, such potential, wasted on the wrong side of history. The spear heart in her chest pulsed, its rhythmic vibrations sending ripples through the ambient mana. Each pulse represented mastery beyond anything I had achieved, the perfect synchronization between wielder and weapon that transformed technique into transcendence. I fell into a defensive stance, Evolvus held in perfect form as I gathered my focus. Against an opponent of this caliber, a single mistake would mean death, not just for me but for everyone in this room. Let's see if you live up to your reputation, Lyra said, her childlike smile widening to unnatural proportions as astral energy began to coalesce around her spear. Show me. Chapter 394. Vrindal, 8. I thought this would be more interesting, Lyra said as she deflected my sword with effortless precision, boredom evident in her eyes. An art which builds momentum. It's somewhat interesting but nothing special. I raised Evolvus high, channeling everything into the Tempest Dance technique. Enhanced aura swirled around the blade, ballooning to the absolute peak I could achieve before I brought it down in a perfectly executed strike. Lyra barely shifted her stance, merely thrusting her spear forward to meet my attack. Our weapons clashed with thunderous force, but while I had committed my entire body to the strike, she remained unmoved, a mountain facing a gentle breeze. What ridiculous strength, I thought as I was pushed backward, my boots leaving furrows in the marble floor. You are even weaker than that Lucifer. Lyra tilted her head, genuine disappointment in her voice. What makes you think you can beat me? I didn't waste breath on a response. Instead, I reached into my bond with Erebus, summoning the power that had saved me in countless previous battles. As you wish, Master. The Lich's consciousness responded as his domain materialized around us. Crimson-tinged darkness spread outward from my position, creating a pocket reality where the normal rules of space and perception bent to Erebus's will. The technique wasn't perfect, its effectiveness limited by my inability to extend it to multiple targets, but it remained my most powerful asset against superior opponents. Oh, a domain, Lyra cooed, looking around with childlike fascination rather than concern. How cute! Without warning, her spear blurred into motion, its tip leaving afterimages as it struck at me from impossible angles. I parried the first 3 strikes, Evolvus moving with enhanced speed within Erebus's domain, but the 4th caught me across the shoulder, shattering a section of bone armor and drawing first blood. Pain lanced through me, but I pushed it aside, countering with a combination of pure light and deep dark channeled simultaneously through my blade. The opposing energies strained against each other, threatening to destabilize under the pressure, but I maintained the delicate balance through sheer determination. Lyra laughed as she batted the attack aside. Light and shadow together? Fascinating theory, catastrophically poor execution. She launched into a sequence of movements that demonstrated the gulf between our abilities. Each thrust of her spear carried astral energy that distorted space itself, leaving trails of corrupted mana that lingered like open wounds in reality. The spear heart at her weapon's core pulsed with living rhythm, perfectly synchronized with her body and will in a way that transcended mere technical mastery. I retreated, desperately searching for an opening while maintaining Erebus's domain. Behind Lyra, I could see Rose attempting to move my injured classmates to safety, her paradox gift temporarily reversing the worst of their wounds. Lucifer had managed to stand again, though blood continued to stream from his overused god's eyes, his enhanced aura flickering weakly as he gathered what little strength remained. "You know what I think I'll do after I'm done playing with you?" Lyra asked conversationally, her spear continuing its relentless assault. "I think I'll take my time with your girlfriends. They were asking for you when I was beating them. The witch princess first, I think. I've always wondered how long someone can scream when you carefully remove their skin." Rage surged through me, hot and immediate. Pure light flared along Evolvus's edge with renewed intensity, fueled by emotion rather than technique. "Or perhaps the Saintess?" Lyra continued, clearly enjoying the effect her words were having. Covenant research indicates interesting reactions when pure light users are corrupted with specialized miasma. I could make her my pet. I launched a fresh assault, Tempest Dance building momentum with each successive strike. The technique's strength grew exponentially as it progressed, each movement flowing into the next with increasing power. For a brief moment, I thought I detected a flicker of genuine effort in Lyra's defense. Not concern, but at least acknowledgement that my attack required some level of attention. The moment passed quickly. Her spear intercepted my blade at the apex of its arc, astral energy pulsing once before shattering the enhanced aura I had so carefully constructed. The backlash sent me crashing into a support column hard enough to crack the reinforced material. Blood filled my mouth, the taste of copper mingling with failure. I spat to the side, reassessing my options with rapidly diminishing hope. Erebus's domain was still active, but its effectiveness against an opponent of Lyra's caliber was proving minimal at best. "Direct combat isn't working," Luna observed, her presence a cool counterpoint to my heated emotions. "We need a different approach." She was right, but what approach remained? Lyra outclassed me in every measurable way, her astral energy overwhelming my enhanced aura, her spear heart making mockery of my attempts at weapon mastery, her experience rendering my tactical advantages moot. I glanced at my fallen classmates, at Rose's desperate attempts to provide aid, at Lucifer's stubborn refusal to acknowledge defeat despite his broken body. If I fell here, they would all die. My failure would mean their deaths. The thought crystallized into cold certainty. I couldn't fail. Not here, not now, not against her. "I'm getting bored," Lyra announced, examining her spear with exaggerated disinterest. "I think I'll finish this up. First you, then your friends, then whatever remains of this pathetic city. The Covenant appreciates thoroughness." She moved toward me, her casual stride more terrifying than any combat stance. The spear in her hand pulsed with malevolent anticipation, astral energy coalescing around its tip in preparation for the final strike. "Any last words, Arthur Nightingale? Any final, desperate gambit to entertain me before I paint these walls with your entrails?" There was one option left, the same barrier I'd been slamming against for months without success. If I could break through the aspect wall, if I could achieve resonance with Evolvus in this moment of desperate need, perhaps I could match her power long enough to create an escape opportunity for the others. I closed my eyes, focusing entirely on my connection with Evolvus. The sword had been my companion through countless battles, an extension of my will and skill, yet true resonance had eluded me despite my best efforts. Please, I thought, not to Luna or Erebus but to the weapon itself. I need you now more than ever. I could feel it, the aspect wall, that invisible barrier between mere mastery and true transcendence. So many times I had pressed against it, seeking the perfect harmony between wielder and weapon that would elevate my swordsmanship to the next level. So many times I had failed. Frustration boiled within me, amplified by desperation and fear. Why couldn't I break through? I had the skill, the determination, the need. What was I missing? "It's not your fault," a traitorous thought whispered in the back of my mind. "Your soul isn't aligned with your body and mind. How could it be, when it doesn't even belong to this world? The realization struck me with the force of physical blow. Was that the problem all along? Was my otherworldly nature the very thing preventing me from achieving what others managed through natural progression? The thought was both liberating and devastating. If true, it meant my failure wasn't due to lack of effort or talent, but it also meant I might never overcome this fundamental incompatibility between my soul and this world's magical principles. Lyra's spear descended toward me, its path a perfect arc that would end at my heart. Time seemed to slow as I opened my eyes, accepting that my best might not be enough after all. The astral energy around her weapon distorted my perception, reality itself bending under its corrupted influence. In that stretched moment, I saw the faces of those I had come to care for in this world. Cecilia's calculating confidence, Rachel's quiet devotion, Seraphina's cool precision, Rose's gentle strength. I saw my classmates, my family, the connections I had forged against all expectations. I couldn't fail them. I wouldn't. With a final, desperate surge of will, I hurled myself against the aspect wall, channeling everything I had, every scrap of mana, every fragment of technique, every ounce of emotion into Evolvus. The sword glowed in response, enhanced aura flaring along its edge as it rose to meet Lyra's descending spear. For a heartbeat, I thought I felt something shift, a momentary resonance between my intent and the blade's existence, a fleeting harmony that hinted at what might be possible. Then Lyra's spear connected, and my world exploded into pain. The enhanced aura around Evolvus shattered instantly, the backlash traveling through the metal and into my body with devastating force. I felt ribs crack, blood vessels rupture, muscles tear under the impossible pressure. Erebus's domain collapsed as my concentration fractured, the bone armor following a moment later as my mana channels overloaded from the strain. As consciousness began to fade, my vision tunneling to a narrow point of light in expanding darkness, I heard a voice. Not Lyra's, but something deeper, older, more fundamental. A sound that seemed to originate not from without but from within my own fading mind. The darkness claimed me as the voice grew. Chapter 395. Vrindal, 9. One moment I was facing certain death, Lyra's spear descending toward my heart. The next, I stood in a vast field of yellow carnations stretching toward the horizon, swaying gently under a warm breeze. The transition was seamless, the battlefield vanishing without warning or transition. The sensory detail was overwhelming. Not the half-formed impressions of a dream or vision, but perfect replication of reality. I could feel the earth yielding slightly beneath my feet, smell the sweet perfume of thousands of blooms, hear the rustle of petals brushing against each other in the wind. Sunlight warmed my skin with the precise intensity of mid-afternoon. Crouching, I brushed my fingers over a nearby flower, feeling the soft petals between my fingertips. The texture was exquisite, each minute ridge and velvet surface rendered with impossible precision. I placed my palm against the bark of a solitary tree, finding it properly rough and irregular, exactly as real bark should feel. Is this a mindscape? I wondered, turning slowly to survey my surroundings. This level of detail and sensory perfection required power beyond anything I'd encountered. Only a radiant rancor or higher, or perhaps something else entirely, could create such a perfect replication of reality within consciousness. Finally, we meet. A voice echoed, now distinct and coming from just behind me. No longer formless laughter, but articulated words carrying deliberate meaning. I turned slowly, feeling a strange anticipation build within me, as if some part of me had been waiting for this moment since I first awakened in this world. Standing among the carnations was a young man my age, with my height, my build, wearing casual clothing that somehow seemed both modern and timeless. His features were mine, yet subtly different, more refined, more assured, belonging to this world in a way I never truly had. Shock rolled through me in waves, my body trembling as if every cell rebelled against what my eyes were seeing. It was impossible, yet undeniable. "Nice to meet you, Transmigrator," he said, azure eyes, so similar to mine yet infinitely deeper, locking onto my gaze with serene confidence. It was Arthur Nightingale, the original Arthur, the one whose life I had stepped into, whose body I now inhabited. Not dead, not gone, but somehow preserved or existing in this impossible space between thought and reality. How? The question ricocheted through my mind, crystallizing countless late-night wonderings into a single moment of confrontation. I had entertained every possibility, that I was in a loop of some kind, that I was Arthur with altered memories, that I had somehow merged with him upon arrival. But facing him now, separate and distinct, I knew the truth. I had truly transmigrated, replaced another soul in its rightful vessel. And now that displaced soul stood before me, seemingly untroubled by my usurpation of its existence. What am I? The words escaped before I could control them, barely audible even in this silent realm. He shook his head, a faint, wry smile touching his lips. My lips, yet expressive in ways I'd never seen in mirrors. Too early for that, he said, his voice resonating with quiet authority. You're too weak to understand. But I can help you, since your current self isn't capable of touching even resonance. In a single fluid motion that defied perception, he closed the distance between us, moving not as a human moves but as thought itself, instantaneous without transition. His hand rose with graceful precision, fingers pressing gently against my forehead. The touch was both cool and warm, physical yet somehow more than physical, a connection that transcended the limitations of flesh. Leave it to me, transmigrator, he murmured, his voice quiet but firm, carrying a weight that enveloped my consciousness like an ocean drawing in a single drop of water. Darkness swept over me, absolute and consuming, not the darkness of unconsciousness or sleep, but something more profound, a void of perfect emptiness that somehow contained infinite potential. And then silence. The moment original Arthur took control, the atmosphere in the ruined hotel lobby shifted. His eyes snapped open, now blazing with an azure light that had never been seen in them before. The wounds that had racked his body moments ago seemed inconsequential as he rose to his feet with fluid grace. Lyra paused mid-strike, her spear hovering inches from where his heart should have been. Something had changed, the prey had transformed in an instant. Her head tilted slightly, curiosity replacing the boredom that had dominated her expression. "What's this?" she asked, taking an instinctive step backward. "A second wind? Or something more interesting?" Arthur smiled, but it wasn't the smile his classmates recognized. This expression carried absolute confidence bordering on arrogance, the look of someone who knew precisely what they were capable of and found their opponent wanting. "Bishop Lyra," he said, his voice carrying a newfound resonance that filled the shattered lobby. "Self-proclaimed future pope of the Umbervale Covenant." He chuckled, the sound echoing strangely. "How unfortunate for you to find yourself on the wrong side of history." The fallen class of students watched in bewildered silence. Something had fundamentally changed about their classmate. His posture, his voice, the very way he occupied space seemed different. Even Lucifer, despite his injuries, sensed the transformation and forced himself to focus through blood-clouded vision. Lyra's expression darkened slightly. Bold words from someone who was dying moments ago. She spun her spear, astral energy swirling around its tip. "Let's see if they're your last." She launched forward with blinding speed, her spear a blur of lethal intent. The attack that had overwhelmed Lucifer's perfect technique now targeted Arthur's seemingly unprotected form. What happened next defied explanation. Arthur moved with impossible precision, his body flowing around the strike as if he'd known exactly where it would be. Not dodging, that would imply reaction, but simply occupying the space the attack wasn't. A Volvis, still clutched in his hand, began to emit a soft, pulsing light that matched the rhythm of his heartbeat. "You're quite skilled," he commented casually, as if they were sparring in a practice hall rather than fighting to the death. "But you rely too heavily on your astral energy advantage. Crude, but effective against those who don't understand its nature." His words carried no taunt, just clinical assessment. He raised Evolvus, the blade now humming with energy that seemed different from his usual techniques. The enhanced aura surrounding it wasn't just stronger, it was qualitatively different, more defined, more coherent. "Let me show you what this body is truly capable of," Arthur said. With perfect fluidity, he stepped forward and executed a strike that seemed deceptively simple. No flashy movements, no shouted techniques, just pure swordplay distilled to its essence. The blade moved with such perfect intent that it seemed to draw a line of inevitability through space. Lyra's eyes widened as she brought her spear up to block. The collision sent shockwaves throughout the ruined lobby, but unlike previous exchanges, she was the one driven backward. Her boots skidded across marble as she fought to maintain balance, genuine shock registering on her face for the first time. "Impossible," she whispered, looking at Arthur with new intensity. "You're at integration rank." "How?" "Sword resonance." Rose breathed from her position beside the injured students, recognizing what was happening before anyone else. "He's achieved resonance." Indeed, Evolvus now hummed with perfect harmony, the blade no longer just a tool, but a true extension of Arthur's will and intent. The aspect wall that had frustrated him for so long had been shattered in an instant, the seemingly insurmountable barrier between technique and transcendence overcome through original Arthur's intervention. Instead of the wildly fluctuating enhanced aura that characterized his previous attempts, every mode of energy now moved with purpose, creating a synchronized whole that amplified power exponentially rather than incrementally. Lyra recovered quickly, her surprise giving way to genuine combat focus. "Interesting," she admitted, her childish effect dropping as she adjusted her stance. "Very interesting indeed." She launched into her grade 6 spear art, astral energy warping reality around her weapon as she executed a series of thrusts so fast they seemed to happen simultaneously. The attack had overwhelmed all 8 classes students working in perfect coordination, a display of power befitting an ascendant ranker. Arthur met it with serene confidence, Evolvus moving in patterns that seemed to anticipate each strike before it materialized. Where the transmigrated Arthur had struggled against overwhelming force, original Arthur flowed through the battle with natural ease, maximizing the body's capabilities in ways its current inhabitant had never discovered. "You're fighting as if you expect me to react," he observed, calmly redirecting a thrust that would have pierced his heart. But resonance isn't about reaction. It's about unity of purpose between wielder and weapon. To demonstrate, he executed a counter that carried both pure light and deep dark simultaneously, not struggling to balance the opposing forces as before, but harmonizing them through perfect resonance. The energies no longer fought each other but complemented, creating an effect that sliced through Lyra's astral defense like a hot knife through butter. Blood spattered across the marble floor as the attack caught her across the shoulder, the first significant injury she had sustained. Her eyes widened, more in fascination than pain. "A mere integration ranker," she murmured, reassessing her opponent entirely. The battle escalated as Lyra abandoned all pretense of toying with her prey. Her spear heart pulsed with increased intensity, astral energy distorting space around them as she committed fully to the fight. The brutality seen in her previous attacks was replaced by methodical killing. Yet for each escalation in her technique, Arthur had an answer. He moved through her attacks with preternatural awareness, Evolvus responding to his intent before conscious thought could form. More than once, Lucifer caught himself holding his breath as Arthur executed maneuvers that should have been impossible for anyone below ascendant rank. The lobby began to disintegrate around them, the remaining support structures crumbling under the pressure of their exchange. Rose created a protective barrier around the injured students, her paradox gift straining to its limits as she reversed the most immediate structural collapses. "How?" Cecilia managed to ask through bloodied lips, watching as Arthur countered techniques that had effortlessly overwhelmed their combined efforts. "How is he doing this?" No one had an answer. Even Lucifer, whose God's eyes allowed him to perceive details others missed, could only shake his head in bewilderment. The battle reached its climax when Arthur executed a perfect thrust that bypassed Lyra's defense entirely, Evolvis glowing with harmonized energy as it aimed directly for her heart. For the first time, genuine fear flashed across her features as she realized she couldn't dodge or block in time. Enough! A thunderous voice commanded as a wall of pure miasma materialized between them, absorbing Arthur's strike at the last possible moment. A tall figure stepped through a rift in space, a man in ornate robes bearing the highest sigils of the Umbervale Covenant. Unlike Lyra's youthful appearance, he carried the weight of centuries in his gaunt features and eyes of absolute darkness. Cardinal Moros, Lyra acknowledged, relief briefly visible before she mastered her expression. The cardinal didn't spare her a glance, his attention fixed entirely on Arthur. Interesting, he murmured, his voice carrying unnatural harmonics. Very interesting indeed. Arthur lowered Evolvis, the resonance still humming through the blade but his posture shifting to cautious assessment. Even with his newfound mastery, he recognized the difference in their power. The cardinal existed in a realm beyond even Lyra's capabilities, an immortal rancor. Chapter 396. Vrindal, 10. Professor Nero reappeared through his own spatial movement, looking somewhat battered but undefeated. His eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation, layers of mana constructs already forming around him in preparation to resume the battle. We shall retreat for now, the cardinal decided, creating another spatial rift. This encounter has yielded sufficient data. Nero's jaw tightened, clearly dissatisfied with allowing the Covenant members to escape, but practicality overrode vengeance. His priority remained the safety of his students, many of whom lay grievously wounded throughout the hotel. Shadows coalesced around the cardinal and Lyra, preparing to transport them from the battlefield. Before the darkness enveloped her completely, Lyra's gaze fixed on Arthur one final time, her smile carrying equal parts fascination and anticipation. Until next time, Arthur Nightingale, she whispered as the shadows claimed them. The tension in the room diminished perceptibly with their departure, though not entirely. Professor Nero exhaled deeply, his focus shifting to the injured students scattered across the devastated lobby. Thank God you're all alive, he said, genuine relief coloring his typically stoic tone. With practiced efficiency, he wove complex healing and protective spells around each class member, stabilizing their most critical injuries. I need to check on the other students now. I'll be back soon. With that promise, he vanished once more, leaving the class of students alone with their thoughts, and with Arthur, who stood casually among the destruction, hands tucked into his pockets with uncharacteristic nonchalance. 9 pairs of eyes turned toward him, each registering varying degrees of suspicion and confusion. Something about Arthur had fundamentally changed. His posture, his expression, the very way he occupied space felt alien compared to the classmate they knew. Rachel was the first to move, pushing herself to her feet with effort despite Nero's healing spell. Her normally serene features had hardened into uncharacteristic wariness as she approached Arthur. "Hey!" she said, her voice carrying subtle challenge beneath its surface. Serafina, Cecilia, and Rose followed her lead, forming a loose semicircle around him. Despite their injuries, all 4 girls radiated focused intent. "Where is Arthur?" they asked in perfect unison, their shared concern temporarily overriding their usual rivalries. Arthur tilted his head, studying them with bemused interest before a smile graced his lips. Not the expression of determined focus they knew, but something older, more knowing. "You can sense that. How perceptive," he replied, his voice carrying familiar timbre but unfamiliar cadence. "The girls in Arthur's life are quite remarkable." "We asked you a question," Rachel said, pure light gathering at her fingertips, ready to strike. Around her, the others prepared their own responses. Cecilia's crimson mana condensed into deadly precision. Serafina's frost-wreathed sword materialized in her grip, and Rose's paradox gift manifested as a glowing blue rose between her palms. Now, do you want to kill your Arthur?" he asked, amusement dancing in his eyes. Without warning, he reached out and plucked Rose's manifested blue rose from the air before she could react. "Don't," Rose began, genuine alarm spreading across her features. The blue rose was no mere manifestation but the physical focus of her gift, imbued with paradoxical properties that made it unpredictable and potentially lethal when mishandled. Her warning died on her lips as Arthur casually brought the rose to his face and inhaled its scent, his smile widening into something that appeared genuinely appreciative rather than mocking. "Paradox," he murmured, studying the bloom with the interest of a connoisseur. "Such fascinating potential. Don't worry, this can't kill me." To their collective shock, he crushed the bloom in his palm, its paradoxical energy dissipating harmlessly into the air. Rose stumbled backward, momentarily disoriented by the unexpected severance of her gift's focus. "Anyway, this is goodbye for some time," Arthur announced, glancing around at the assembled students with what almost appeared to be fond regret. "Goodbye," Lucifer echoed, managing to stand despite his injuries, his god's eyes still active as he studied Arthur with renewed intensity. "What do you mean?" Clara asked, voicing the confusion shared by everyone present. "I need to leave for about a year," Arthur replied, his tone matter-of-fact despite the bombshell announcement. "So get me a leave of absence from the academy. You four can do that much for your dear Arthur, right?" His gaze lingered on the four girls, the request carrying weight beyond its simple phrasing. His statement hung in the air, impossible to refute after what they had witnessed during the battle against Lyra. The Arthur before them had demonstrated mastery beyond what should have been possible, breaking through the aspect wall and achieving resonance with casual ease, where their classmate had struggled for months. "A year," Serafina whispered, her analytical mind quickly running through implications. "The academy won't simply allow." "They will with your backing," Arthur interrupted smoothly. "How do we know you'll come back?" Rose asked quietly, the emotional question cutting through the strategic implications. Arthur's smile returned, gentler now. "You have my word. 1 year from today, I'll return." He reached out, briefly touching Rose's cheek with surprising tenderness. "And when I do, I'll be ready to face what's coming." Without warning, he turned and began walking toward the shattered entrance of the hotel lobby, his movements carrying absolute confidence despite the destruction surrounding them. "Wait!" Rachel called after him. "What should we tell everyone? The professors, your family?" Arthur paused, glancing back over his shoulder. "Tell them I'm going for isolation training. It's not even a lie." His expression grew momentarily somber. "And tell them I'll return stronger. Strong enough to protect what matters." With those parting words, he stepped through the ruined doorway and into the chaos of Vrindal's final night. Aftermath. Professor Nero returned to the Crystalline Haven Hotel within the hour, his expression grave as he surveyed the devastation. The hotel had become a makeshift emergency center, with injured students receiving treatment in what remained of the grand ballroom. The death toll among civilians was climbing rapidly, though miraculously no Mythos Academy students had been lost. Yet, "Class A," Nero called, gesturing for them to gather. "I need a situation report." The students assembled before him, their injuries partially healed but exhaustion evident in their postures. Lucifer, as the highest ranked, stepped forward to speak for the group. "We encountered Bishop Lyra of the Umbervale Covenant," he stated, his usual composure somewhat restored despite the dried blood still visible around his eyes. "She was beyond our capabilities." "And where is Nightingale?" Nero asked, noting the conspicuous absence of the second-ranked student. A moment of uncomfortable silence followed as the students exchanged glances, silently deliberating on how to explain what they'd witnessed. Rachel finally spoke, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "Arthur achieved sword resonance during the battle, Professor. He managed to wound the bishop before Cardinal Moros intervened." Nero's eyebrows rose slightly, the closest to open surprise he ever displayed. "He wounded a bishop? At his age and rank? That's unprecedented." "Yes," Serafina continued. "After the battle, he informed us he needs to pursue specialized training. He's requested a year-long sabbatical." "A sabbatical?" Nero's expression darkened. "In the middle of the academic year?" After an attack of this magnitude? That's completely irregular. We support his request, Cecilia stated, her tone leaving no room for argument. The four of us will use our family connections to ensure it's approved through proper channels. Nero studied the four girls with analytical intensity. You're certain this is what he wants? His behavior wasn't influenced by the battle? He was different, Rose admitted quietly, but lucid, focused. He said he needed to prepare for threats beyond the Covenant. And you believe him? We do, the four replied in unison, their typical rivalries temporarily set aside in unified purpose. Nero sighed, running a hand through his hair, a rare display of human frustration from the normally impassive professor. We have more immediate concerns. Vrindal has fallen. The Covenant's forces have overrun the northeastern quadrant, and evacuation portals are being established for the remaining civilians and students. What about the staff? The other professors? Jean asked. Professor Ashford was injured protecting Class C students. The others are assisting with evacuations. Nero's expression hardened. We leave within the hour. The Northern military will handle the containment and recovery operation. As Class A dispersed to help with the evacuation efforts, Lucifer lingered behind, addressing Nero privately. Professor, what Arthur did, it shouldn't have been possible. Nero was silent for a moment before responding. No, it shouldn't have been. Which means either our understanding of his capabilities was fundamentally flawed, or something else was at work, Lucifer finished. Keep your observations to yourself for now, Nero instructed. When he returns, we'll have questions. Until then, we focus on the crisis at hand. As such, Vrindal City fell. Chapter 397. The Well of Miasma 1. Where are we going? I asked Arthur, my original self, as he controlled my body, taking us further from the devastation of Vrindal toward the northern wilderness. Somewhere important, he responded simply, his pace never slowing despite the harsh terrain. You have to give me something, I pressed. Does this mean you can save me whenever I want? Just appear and take over when things get difficult? Of course not, he said, a trace of annoyance in his voice. My power is reaching its limits, but it is all going according to plan. Regardless, if you're in danger, even if I can help you, it means you will end up sacrificing potential future growth. We continued in silence for several minutes, the landscape growing progressively bleaker as we traveled north. The temperature dropped noticeably, and vegetation became sparse, then non-existent. Something about the air felt wrong, heavier, tainted. So you have planned more of this training beyond this time? I deduced, breaking the uncomfortable silence. Yes, he confirmed. I don't want you to waste time like I did trying to find a proper structure. This break is needed for training. I need to fix you. Do I need fixing? I asked, somewhat indignant. I've been managing well enough. Yeah, you are weak, he replied bluntly. Even without resonance, your current abilities should be enough to take down Lucifer and Jack. You should have come first in the Crown Challenge, and that's not considering the transcendent level of mana control I possess. Not possible. I shook my head, unable to accept his assessment. My fighting is perfect. Ha! He scoffed, the sound carrying genuine amusement. Far, far from it, Nightingale. We crested a ridge, and I suddenly understood our destination. Below us stretched a vast depression in the earth, perhaps a kilometer in diameter. Unlike the barren landscape surrounding it, this pit was filled with churning darkness. Not the absence of light, but something actively consuming it. Tendrils of miasma rose from the surface like spectral fingers reaching for the sky, only to be pulled back into the roiling mass. What is this place? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. A miasma well, Original Arthur confirmed, his expression unreadable as he gazed down at the corruption. One of several scattered across the northern border. This particular one remains undiscovered by the Covenant, for now. And why have you brought me here? Because you lack desperation, he stated simply. You've grown complacent in your knowledge, relying on your foreknowledge rather than pushing your limits. Lucifer is stronger than he was in your novel, because he fights with true desperation. He has no map to follow, no assurance of eventual success. I studied the miasma well with growing unease. What exactly are you planning? I'm going to leave you here, he said, his tone matter-of-fact. At the bottom of this well, surrounded by concentrated miasma that will continuously spawn manifestations drawn from your own fears and weaknesses. That's suicide? I protested, watching as shapeless forms briefly coalesced within the darkness before dissolving again. The corruption alone would kill a normal person within hours, he finished for me. But you're not normal, are you? You have both pure light and deep dark affinities. You have soul resonance with Luna. You have Erebus. You have all the tools needed to survive. For how long? I asked, my throat suddenly dry. Until next January, he replied. That gives you 11 months. I blinked in surprise. 11 months in that pit? Yes, he confirmed. If you fail to escape before then, you'll die. The Umbervale Covenant will discover this well around that time. They're always seeking new training grounds for their bishop candidates. Every new year, they send their prospective bishops to miasma wells as a final test. If you're still there when they arrive, they'll kill you. The casual way he described my potential death sent chills through me. And if I manage to escape, then you'll have grown strong enough to face what's coming, he said. The world is changing faster than your novel predicted. The threats are evolving, adapting. You expect me to become stronger than Bishop Lyra in 11 months? I asked incredulously. She's ascendant rank. That's impossible. For the first time, original Arthur's expression softened slightly. You don't need to reach the same rank to surpass her strength. Ranks are generalizations, not absolute measurements. What you need is to transcend your current limitations, to stop fighting like you're following a script and start fighting like someone whose life depends on every move. He stepped closer to the edge of the well, peering down into its depths. Besides, I've already given you a head start by breaking through the aspect wall. Sword resonance is now within your grasp. You just need to fully integrate it. I stared at the churning miasma, trying to process what was happening. Part of me wanted to resist, to fight against this original self who had appeared so suddenly to upend my carefully constructed path. But another part, the part that had felt the overwhelming gap between myself and Lyra, knew he was right. The miasma beasts you'll face aren't like standard dark beasts, original Arthur continued, his tone becoming instructional. They're pure manifestations of corruption, given form by your own fears and weaknesses. They'll evolve as you do, always presenting the perfect challenge to push you further. And you think this torture will make me stronger? I asked bitterly. I know it will, he replied with absolute certainty. Because it's what I would have done if I'd had the chance. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I glimpsed something like regret. I'm giving you the path I wish I'd had. He stepped to the very edge of the precipice, our body now poised above the swirling darkness below. One final piece of advice. Don't resist the miasma entirely. Learn from it. Understand it. Only by comprehending corruption can you truly master its opposition. Wait. I began, suddenly realizing he intended to jump. 11 months, transmigrator, he said, a hint of a smile touching his lips. Make them count. With those words, he leapt forward, our shared body plummeting toward the churning surface of the miasma well. As we fell, I felt his control slipping away, consciousness returning fully to me just as we broke through the surface of the corruption. The miasma closed over me like liquid night, cold and burning simultaneously. It pressed against my skin, seeking entrance through every pore, every breath. Instinctively, I channeled pure light to create a barrier, but I remembered original Arthur's words about not resisting entirely. With grim determination, I allowed a controlled amount of miasma to touch me, to be processed through my dual affinities rather than rejected outright. The sensation was excruciating, like having my nerves scraped raw, but I maintained focus through the pain. As I sank deeper into the well, Vague shapes began to form in the darkness around me. Featureless at first, then gradually taking on more defined forms. I caught glimpses of claws, teeth, eyes burning with malevolent intelligence. The miasma beasts had noticed my presence. The real training was about to begin. 11 months to become strong enough to escape. 11 months to surpass an ascendant rank bishop. 11 months to live or die by my own strength. The hunt had begun. Chapter 398. The Well of Miasma 2. It was the end of year 2043. New Year's Eve should have been a time of celebration, a moment to welcome fresh beginnings with hope and joy. But in the Nightingale household, the atmosphere was thick with dread. "He should be back by now," Alice whispered, her eyes vacant as she sat motionless on the sofa. Her fingers trembled slightly until Douglas gently covered them with his own. "He may be late," Douglas said, his voice steady despite the worry etched in the lines around his eyes. "The border regions are unpredictable this time of year." Alice turned to him, her expression fracturing. But if he's late, does that mean he's caught?" The question hung in the air like a physical thing. The fear they'd both been avoiding for months finally given voice. "Shh! Don't say that," Douglas murmured, drawing her closer. His lips pressed into a thin line as he struggled to maintain composure for them both. They had learned of their son's training expedition from Mythos Academy 11 months ago. The explanation had been deliberately vague: a special research opportunity, a chance for exceptional growth, assurances of safety protocols. The elite institution's reputation had temporarily assuaged their concerns. Their attempts to track Arthur through his phone had led nowhere. The signal lost at the northern border, where the Umbervale Covenant's influence corrupted both land and technology. The Academy representatives had been clear: Arthur would return before the year ended. But midnight approached, and with it, the terrible certainty that if their son didn't return tonight, he never would. Captured or killed, the distinction hardly mattered beyond the northern border. "I hope Arya is having fun at her party," Douglas thought as he held his wife, feeling her tears dampen his shirt. He had insisted their daughter maintain her plans, wanting to spare her this vigil. If the worst happened, she deserved one final evening of normalcy before their world collapsed. Across the city, Arya Nightingale stood among laughing friends, streamers and confetti falling around her as music pulsed through her friend's home. Unlike her peers, her eyes remained fixed on her watch, the minutes ticking relentlessly toward midnight. Why haven't Mom and Dad messaged yet? The thought circled her mind like a predator. Did he not return? Isn't time running out? She had known the truth, more than her parents suspected. As the countdown to midnight began around her, tears welled in her eyes, blurring her vision. Then, through the moisture, her watch screen blinked with an incoming message. A single line from her father: "He's home." The tears fell freely now, relief washing through her like a physical force as her friends counted down, oblivious to her private celebration that had nothing to do with the new year. Arthur was back. "Is it true?" Cecilia demanded, her voice carrying through the imperial residence with such force that the attendants froze in their New Year preparations. "He's back? He's back in Avalon." "Yes, Your Highness," Nate confirmed, the Imperial Knight's formal posture belying the tension in his voice. "He entered Avalon City approximately 30 minutes ago. He is currently in protective custody." "Protective custody?" Cecilia's crimson eyes narrowed dangerously, the temperature in the room seeming to drop several degrees. "Who dares to detain him?" Nate suppressed a shiver, having witnessed the consequences of the princess's displeasure before. "Your Highness, it was implemented for safety purposes. Standard protocol for anyone crossing back from beyond the northern border. Please understand." "Take me to him," Cecilia interrupted, her tone brooking no argument. "Now." The Imperial Knight hesitated, caught between protocols. Their Majesties and His Highness are attending the Royal New Year's reception. Do you wish for me to inform them of your departure? I don't have time for diplomatic niceties, Cecilia said, already moving toward the door, her formal gown rustling with each determined step. Get me a car and let's go. Immediately. Yes, Your Highness. Nate bowed deeply before activating his communication device to arrange transportation. Alone for a moment, Cecilia pressed a hand against her chest, feeling the rapid cadence of her heartbeat. After 11 months, 3 days, and approximately 4 hours, not that she had been counting with obsessive precision, she would see him again. Arthur. The sensation of his hand in hers, the particular way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the solid presence of him beside her. Memories she had revisited countless times during his absence. Memories that had sustained her through diplomatic functions and royal obligations that suddenly seemed meaningless in comparison. She had never been one to acknowledge weakness, even to herself, but Arthur's absence had created a void she could neither ignore nor fill. The realization both disturbed and fascinated her. How had he become so essential? The sleek, armored vehicle arrived without sound, its autonomous systems recognizing the imperial signature. Cecilia slid inside, Nate following with practiced efficiency. Where is he being held? She asked as the car pulled away from the palace complex. The Sentinel facility, Your Highness. Northern Quadrant. Cecilia nodded, her expression unreadable as she gazed out at the glittering lights of Avalon. The city celebrated around them, oblivious to the return that mattered more to her than any new year. In mere minutes, she would see Arthur Nightingale again. Changed, perhaps, by whatever trials he had faced beyond the border. But present, real, returned. The thought sent an unfamiliar warmth through her chest, one she had finally stopped trying to suppress or analyze. Some truths needed no explanation. Clear the area, Cecilia commanded as she swept through the Sentinel facility corridors, her imperial tone leaving no room for argument. Guards and officials scrambled aside, pressing themselves against walls as she passed. Your Highness? Began the facility director, hurrying alongside her with evident distress. There are protocols that must be followed before anyone can. I said. Cecilia cut him off without breaking stride, crimson eyes flashing dangerously. Clear the area. The director's protest died in his throat. With a curt nod, he motioned for the remaining personnel to withdraw. Nate followed several paces behind, observing with quiet fascination. He had served the imperial family for years, but rarely had he seen the princess exercise her authority with such raw determination. When they reached the secured wing, Cecilia paused before a door marked only with a simple designation code. For just a moment, Nate caught something unexpected in her usually composed features. Vulnerability, perhaps even fear. Then it was gone, replaced by imperial resolve as she waved her hand over the access panel. The door slid open silently. Arthur Nightingale stood by the window, gazing out at the glittering New Year celebrations illuminating Avalon's skyline. He turned at the sound of the door, and Cecilia froze in the threshold. For 3 heartbeats, neither moved. Then she was across the room, propriety forgotten as she threw her arms around him, burying her face against his shoulder. Arthur's arms enfolded her immediately, his eyes closing as he held her tight. Nate remained in the doorway, momentarily forgotten. The reunion before him was not what shocked him, however, it was Arthur himself. The Arthur before him now stood differently, held himself differently. An aura of quiet power radiated from him, subtle but unmistakable to Nate's trained senses. The air around him seemed charged, like the stillness before lightning strikes. It was the kind of presence that couldn't be taught or manufactured, only forged through trials that few survived. Impossible, Nate thought, his pulse quickening with a swordsman's instinctive recognition of a worthy opponent. He's still technically high integration rank, but this pressure. His fingers twitched reflexively toward his sword hilt. The disciplined imperial knight in him maintained composure, but the warrior in his blood sang with excitement. He had heard rumors of what happened beyond the northern border, of course, training grounds where survival itself was considered success. But to transform someone this completely in less than a year. When Arthur finally looked up and met Nate's gaze over Cecilia's shoulder, the Imperial Knight felt an electric jolt of recognition. Those eyes held a depth, a knowing, a capacity that hadn't been there before. A silent challenge that made Nate's combat instincts flare to life. A memory surfaced, the sophomore ball at Mythos Academy, where Nate had last encountered Arthur. That night, Princess Cecilia had ordered him to acquire Arthur during her confrontation with two rival princesses and the daughter of a count. Back then, Arthur hadn't even reached integration rank. He was merely the top-ranked second-year student at Mythos Academy, exceptional but still developing. Nate had handled him with ease then, but that boy who was just growing into his potential had somehow bloomed into a monster. Chapter 399. The Well of Miasma 3. He's sizing you up, Luna informed me as I caught the Imperial Knight's evaluating gaze. I recognized him immediately, the same Ascendant ranker who had been deployed to Mythos Academy, the one Cecilia had commanded to kidnap me during the sophomore ball incident. Back then, he had seemed untouchable. An Ascendant ranker as formidable as my professors. Someone I couldn't hope to challenge. But not anymore. Let him, I replied to Luna, my internal voice calm. I don't care. I returned my attention to Cecilia, who clung to me with uncharacteristic vulnerability, her imperial composure momentarily forgotten. She felt small in my arms, despite the tremendous power I knew she wielded. 11 months had changed us both. The four girls must have missed me beyond compare. The thought kindled a flicker of resentment toward my former self, the original Arthur who had been whisked away without consideration for what it would do to them. But after everything I'd endured, everything I'd gained, it was worth it. You got even more beautiful over time, I whispered, studying her face as she looked up at me. Her crimson eyes brightened in response, the imperial coldness giving way to something warmer, more dangerous. Don't make me want to capture you more, Nightingale, she whispered back with a smile that didn't quite mask her sincerity. This wasn't a game to her, it never had been. I need to meet my family, I said, gently stroking the small of her back. My parents, Arya, they had endured their own kind of hell these past months. I'll come with you, Cecilia declared, finally pulling away just enough to reveal the imperial resolve returning to her features. And I'll punish all those who dared to detain you. Don't. They were doing their job, I cautioned, recognizing the familiar threat in her tone. How dare they detain you like a criminal? She muttered, dismissing my objection entirely. At this point, I'll need to take drastic measures. A chill crawled up my spine at her words. I'd seen firsthand what Cecilia's drastic measures could entail. I pulled her closer, feeling her relax against me. The subtle scent of her perfume, elegant, seductive, filled my senses, and I felt my own tension begin to unwind. Finally, I could breathe. The last 11 months had been hellish to say the least. Training grounds where death lurked in every shadow. Challenges that pushed beyond mere physical limits into realms of mental and spiritual anguish. But I had survived. More than survived. Tell me the most important thing that happened in your life first, I requested, curious about how Avalon had changed in my absence. I became the crown princess, Cecilia answered simply. My eyes narrowed in surprise. This was an unexpected deviation. In the original timeline, Cecilia had never become crown princess of the Slatemark Empire, not because she lacked capability, but because she had never wanted the throne while her older brother lived. Why? I asked, genuinely curious about this significant shift. To better support you, of course. She tilted her head as if stating the obvious. I will make you sit at the peak of the world as my future husband, Arthur. The raw sincerity in her declaration caught me off guard. I could feel her genuine desire, the sheer determination behind her words, and found myself smiling as I leaned down to kiss her forehead. You also missed my 17th birthday, she continued as we began walking toward the exit, her hand firmly clasped in mine. And of course, the 3 other girls' birthdays as well. I'll need to make amends, I promised, already contemplating what that might entail. And Arthur, Cecilia said as we stepped into the self-driving car. Her expression shifted, growing more serious as she glanced at Nate. Cover your ears. As you wish, the Imperial Knight responded dutifully. I observed as mana shimmered around Cecilia and me, forming a sound barrier that would prevent even an ascendant ranker from eavesdropping. Who was the being who took over your body? Cecilia asked directly, her crimson eyes piercing into mine, searching for truth. The question didn't surprise me. Of course she would have noticed. Cecilia missed nothing. I am not fully sure, I responded honestly. I knew it was the original Arthur, but the full extent of his identity remained elusive, even to me. As the car glided through Avalon's gleaming streets, Cecilia shifted closer until she was practically in my lap, her crimson eyes never leaving mine. Whatever it was, she murmured, tracing a finger along my jawline. It better understand that you belong to me. The possessiveness in her voice was unmistakable. To us, the heat of her touch penetrated through my clothes, a deliberate reminder of the connection we shared. Cecilia had never been subtle about her desires. The car slowed as we approached the exclusive district where my family's penthouse stood among Avalon's elite residences. Cecilia reluctantly shifted away from me as the vehicle came to a stop. Your family deserves their reunion, she said, regaining some of her imperial composure. I'll return to the palace for now. When will I see you again? I asked. She smiled, the predatory edge returning to her expression. Soon enough. I have arrangements to make. The four of us expect proper apologies for your extended absence. I nodded, understanding the implicit promise or perhaps threat in her words. Until then, she said, pressing one final, lingering kiss to my lips before the car door opened. Don't disappear again, Nightingale. Next time, I'll burn the world to find you. I had no doubt she meant every word. The elevator ride to the penthouse gave me a moment to compose myself. Despite everything I'd faced beyond the northern border, Cecilia's slate mark could still leave me feeling slightly off balance. Some things never changed. As the doors slid open to reveal our family's luxurious penthouse, I heard voices from the living room. A wave of emotion crashed over me. Voices I hadn't heard in nearly a year. Home. My sister spotted me first. Arya froze mid-sentence, her eyes widening in disbelief before she launched herself across the room. Arthur! She screamed, colliding with me hard enough that only my enhanced reflexes kept us both upright. You're really back. You're really here. Over her shoulder, I saw my parents rise from the sofa, tears already streaming down my mother's face. I was home. Arthur! My mother's voice broke as she rushed forward, nearly collapsing against me. I felt her tears soaking through my shirt as her hands clutched desperately at my back, as if confirming I was real. My father stood just behind her, his usual stoic demeanor cracked wide open, revealing raw emotion I'd rarely witnessed. Welcome home, son, he managed, his voice thick. When he embraced us both, I noticed the tremor in his arms, the slight hunch in his shoulders, 11 months of worry etched into his frame. Arya hadn't released her grip on me, her face buried against my shoulder. We thought, she began, then stopped herself. No, I always knew you'd come back. I told them every day. The penthouse looked exactly as I remembered. Modern, elegant, with panoramic views of Avalon's skyline. It felt both familiar and strange, like returning to a childhood home you've outgrown. Let him breathe, everyone, my father finally said, though his hand lingered on my shoulder. He's probably exhausted. I'm fine, I assured them, though exhaustion didn't begin to describe what I felt. It's just good to be home. We moved to the living room, where signs of their vigil were evident, maps with marked locations near the northern border, legal documents, communications with Mythos Academy officials. They wouldn't tell us anything, my mother said, finally composing herself enough to speak. Just that you were on a special training expedition. For 11 months. The last words carried an accusation, not aimed at me but at those who had taken me. It was intensive, I offered carefully. The communication blackout was part of the training. Arya muttered, then flinched at our mother's sharp look. Sorry, but it is. We're not stupid. People don't just disappear for a year on training expeditions without a single message home. I met her gaze. My sister had always been perceptive, too perceptive sometimes. I saw the questions burning in her eyes, the demand for truth. You're right, I acknowledged. It wasn't just training. But I can't talk about all of it right now. Were you in danger? My father asked directly, always practical. I considered lying. It would be kinder, but they deserved better than comforting falsehoods. Yes, I admitted. But as you can see, I survived. More than survived, Arya commented, studying me with narrowed eyes. You're different. A tense silence followed. They were all looking at me, really looking, and seeing the changes I couldn't hide. The way I moved, the alertness that never fully left my posture, the hardness that had entered my gaze. Are you hungry? My mother finally asked, falling back on the universal parental solution to awkward moments. I can make your favorite. That would be wonderful, I said, grateful for the reprieve. Some conversations could wait until we'd all had time to adjust to my return. As she busied herself in the kitchen, Arya sidled closer on the sofa. She bumped her shoulder against mine like she used to when we were younger. I'm just glad you're back. My father cleared his throat. Arthur, whatever happened, whatever you need, we're here. The simple declaration nearly undid me. After everything I'd faced beyond the northern border, it was this, the unconditional support of family, that threatened to breach my hard-won composure. I know, I said, my voice steady despite the emotions churning beneath. Thank you. Home wasn't the same. I wasn't the same. But in that moment, surrounded by the people who had waited faithfully for my return, I felt something I hadn't experienced in nearly a year. Peace.
Chapter 400. Luna.
The silence of my bedroom pressed against me like a physical weight. It feels wrong that there's no danger anywhere, I thought, staring at the ornate ceiling of my room. The well of miasma had been hell incarnate, a place where even sleep offered no sanctuary. I'd survived on water conjured through magic, sustained myself on miasma-resistant plants that somehow thrived in that corrupted environment. Day after day, I'd fought miasmic beasts whose very existence defied natural law. My senses had adapted, evolving to detect the subtlest shifts in my surroundings. The whisper of movement in the dark, the almost imperceptible change in air pressure before an attack, the distinctive scent of different predators. That heightened awareness had kept me alive. Now, those same finely tuned senses searched fruitlessly for threats in a place where none existed. The safety felt alien, unnatural. A fresh breath, yes, but profoundly disorienting to the creature I'd become. I knew sleep would elude me tonight. My body had grown accustomed to surviving on mere fragments of rest, snatched in brief moments when the environment permitted. The soft mattress beneath me felt like a trap, too comfortable, too exposed. You aren't surviving anymore, but living? Luna reminded me gently as I closed my eyes in a futile attempt to quiet my mind. I knew she was right. This discomfort was merely misalignment. My adapted self struggling to recalibrate to peace after living so long in war. Here, in my home, I was safe. I could breathe. The adjustment reminded me of another life, the one after Emma's death. Despite her final plea that I forsake vengeance, how could I not yearn for justice? For retribution? That path had led me to eliminate countless enemies, to exist in perpetual motion, always one step ahead of those who hunted me. Kill or be killed. A simple philosophy that had kept me breathing. But I'd grown soft in the comfort of this world, forgotten the harsh lessons of my previous existence. Perhaps that's why Arthur had cast me into the well of miasma, to strip away the complacency, to reforge what had begun to dull. After all, it is better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. I murmured to the empty room, the ancient proverb taking on new meaning. I could allow myself happiness, but not softness. Not when I knew what waited beyond Avalon's borders. Not when I knew what was coming. I'm surprised you were able to grow so much, Luna said, materializing beside me in her chibi form, golden eyes luminous in the dim light. Despite my significant growth in power, I remained within the integration rank in terms of mana capacity, not enough to manifest Luna in her full glory. The tiny spirit hovered near my pillow, her diminutive stature belying the ancient power she contained. Well, I am too, I admitted, gently brushing my fingertip across the top of her head. She scowled at the gesture, but the effect was undermined by her current form. Fierce intent delivered through a vessel that could fit in the palm of my hand. You want me to put you to sleep? Luna asked, noting my restlessness. I nodded, grateful for the offer. Yes, please. Luna drifted above me, her tiny form haloed by faint golden light as she settled against my forehead. The cool touch of her essence began to spread, a welcome counterpoint to the hypervigilance that kept my muscles tense. Good night, my contractor, she whispered, her magic seeping into my consciousness like gentle rain on parched earth. I felt the rigid alertness begin to dissolve, my breathing slowing to match the rhythm she imposed. For the first time in 11 months, I surrendered completely to sleep. Luna gazed down at her sleeping contractor, her diminutive hand still resting against his forehead. In the darkness, her golden eyes glowed with ancient wisdom as she studied his features, softened now in slumber. So young. He had not yet reached his 18th year. Even by human standards, he remained barely more than a child, and in the eyes of a Chelan like herself, practically an infant against the vast expanse of her existence. From him, I once saw only potential, Luna whispered to the silent room. Now I see greatness realized. Her thoughts drifted to Julius Slatemark, whose fate had once burned with such radiance. The emperor of the world, that had been his destiny, to ascend and rule from atop civilization itself. As a Chelan, it had been her sacred duty to guide and support that greatness. But Julius's brilliance had dimmed after conquering merely the central continent. His ambition satisfied too easily, his greatness unfulfilled. And so Luna had waited, 1,000 years of solitude, watching, searching for another whose fate might burn with similar fire. Many had come to her in that millennium, many who might be called exceptional. Liam Kagu, the first hero, had possessed power even greater than Julius, but his fate had been bound to sacrifice from the moment of his birth. And sacrifice, Luna had witnessed enough of that to last eternity. The memory of such heroes turned to ash still haunted her. No, Liam had not been the one. Then Lucifer Windward had emerged, his destiny blazing so brilliantly it threatened to blind even her. If Julius had been the North Star in Earth's night sky, then Lucifer was the sun itself. Overwhelming, undeniable, inevitable. Luna had prepared herself to serve this new emperor, waiting patiently for him to seek her out as prophecy dictated. But Lucifer never came. Instead, Arthur Nightingale had stood before her, an impossibility made flesh. The fateless one. In a world where Luna could read the destiny of every living creature, Arthur existed beyond her sight. A void where fate should be, a blank canvas that refused the brush of predestination. Her most fundamental ability, the power to perceive and shape fate, rendered useless before him. She had chosen him on whim initially, perhaps even out of spite toward the destiny that had failed her before. Julius had died before fulfilling his potential. This time, she would place her faith in one whom destiny itself could not claim. Through their bond, she had witnessed Arthur's journey. His rise to heights that defied expectation, his falls that would have destroyed lesser beings. She had shared in his fleeting happiness and endured his profound sorrows. But beyond all that, she had glimpsed something in him that shone too brilliantly for even her immortal eyes to fully comprehend. I chose correctly, Luna acknowledged, a rare smile gracing her delicate features. You, my contractor, were the right choice after all. If ever you doubt yourself, trust in this. I have seen empires rise and crumble, heroes ascend and fall, and still, I choose you. I will support you until my very essence fails, until the last spark of my immortal soul extinguishes. For that is why I bound myself to you. Luna gazed at the sleeping form of the boy who carried burdens no child should bear, her expression resolute as she made her decision. You are more than merely my contractor, she whispered, her form beginning to shimmer as though composed of starlight. From this moment forward, I bind myself to you by sacred oath. When the time comes that I can manifest in my true form, I will fight at your side and, if necessary, die for your cause. Her voice dropped lower still, resonating with power ancient as the mountains. Arthur Nightingale, the Fateless, I pledge